Welcome dear viewers to the video on topic can we get biowaivers for modified release formulations. Many of the times we face this question that the biowaivers are granted for the BCS based biowaivers and biowaivers are also granted for the immediate release type of formulations. But what is the information, what is the understanding and what are the guidelines for the biowaivers for modified release formulations? Whether we can get the biowaiver for MR formulations or not. This video will provide you the information regarding the same. So modified release formulations are those type of formulations where the release of the API is altered. The release might be slowed down. The release might be time dependent. The release might be for the specific site. All these formulations are called as or known as modified release formulations. Understanding about the regulatory constraint and the possibilities for the biowaivers for MR formulation is very important. Let's start with the introduction to biowaiver. It is a regulatory permission or provision to skip the in vivo B studies, and it is based on the demonstration of the in vitro equivalence. If you prove the in vitro equivalence, then you can get the biowaiver. It is commonly granted for the IR type of formulations containing highly soluble drug substances belonging to BCS class 1 and 3. This is generally called as BCS based biowaiver. The criteria for biowaivers are high solubility of the API, high permeability of the API, or the compositional similarity. If the API is not having high permeation, then rapid and similar dissolution requirement. Typically, the biowaivers are granted for the immediate release type of formulations, but biowaivers are not granted for the modified release type of formulations. So the simple answer to the question, can we get biowaivers for modified release formulations, is that no, we cannot get biowaiver for the modified release formulations. But certainly we can get waiver for the bio studies for the non-B strengths or lower strengths, you can say, or the strengths other than the bioequivalence study strength. If you have three strengths, for example 100 mg, 50 mg, 25 mg, you need to perform the bioequivalence on 100 mg or as per the strength provided by the regulatory bodies or recommended by the regulatory bodies. And then after showing the similar dissolutions, composition similarity, similarity in the manufacturing process, you can get the biowaivers for the other strengths. And why biowaivers are not granted for the modified release type of formulations? Because these have complex release kinetics and we cannot predict the in vivo behavior of the formulations from the in vitro release profiles. Then small changes may affect the release profile. These changes may be to the formulation composition, to the manufacturing processes, to the critical material attributes. Then the MR type of formulations have site specific absorption and this varies across the GI tract. Also, the food effect is not captured by in vitro dissolution studies. So food effect sensitivity is there. That's why for many of the MR formulations, bioequivalence is performed in the fasting state as well as in the fed state. Also, for many of the formulations, considering the accumulation, considering the safety, multi-dose bioequivalence studies are required to be demonstrated. So what are the exceptions? There are rare exceptions and these are very specific to the formulation. Robust in vitro in vivo correlation, IVIVC. Extensive scientific justification. Based on this, you can ask for the waivers for the MR formulations for the lower strains or other strains than the B strain. EMA pilot programs for IVIVC based biowaiver. No part of standard BCS based biowaiver framework. So as we have the guideline available for BCS based biowaiver, the guidelines are not very much clear regarding the biowaiver for MR formulations, and generally biowaiver are not granted for the MR formulations. Regulatory guidelines are there for some of the biowaivers. ICH M9, US FDA has provided BCS based biowaiver, but it doesn't provide the biowaiver for ER type of formulations, DR type of formulations, or simply MR formulations. EMA-MR guideline provides in vivo be needed unless strong IVIVC plus bridging data is there. Also, one and the same thing, biowaivers are generally not granted. Conclusion on the biowaiver for MR. MR formulations are not eligible for the standard biowaivers. B studies, mainly in the fasting and fed state, are mandatory unless there is a proven IVIVC and full scientific and regulatory justification. So whenever you are asked a question that can you get the biowaiver for MR formulations, so the answer will be no. But you can get the biowaivers for the lower strains or non-B strains. If you demonstrate the information and rationale for the biowaiver for lower strength, then you can get it. There is strict condition requirement for the lower strength biowaiver, and the biowaiver is not automatic. It is reviewed and on the basis of case by case, these are approved or granted. So what are the key considerations for the lower strength waiver? Formulation proportionality, Q1, Q2, Q3, identical manufacturing process, linear pharmacokinetics, and similarity in the in vitro resolution. Preferably with IVIVC support, regulatory positions will be there and it will be handled depending on to the formulation. As per EMA, waivers are allowed for the proportional MR strains with linear PK and the similar dissolution. As per US FDA, only allowed if strong IVIVC or bridging data is available. So when biowaiver is not accepted, what are the points to be considered? At which or at which time when the biowaiver is not accepted? So it is non-linear PK, different release mechanisms or coatings, critical excipient changes, multiple versus single unit system, food effect, variations among the strains. As we know that modified release formulations may be in the form of single tablet, bilayer tablet, multiple pellets. So depending on the formulations, the cases will be reviewed by the regulatory authorities. Now we'll see the information in a tabular form so that we can understand it in a easy way. Criteria is BCS based biowaiver. For IR formulations, it is allowed for BCS class 1 and 3. For MR formulations, it is not allowed. Waiver for the additional strains. For IR formulations, always it is accepted. Often it is accepted. For MR formulations, we need to prove the similarity and there is strict criteria. They need for in vivo B study. Often IR formulations can get the waiver, but for MR formulations, B study is required. IVIVC justification is optional for the IR formulations, but it is strongly recommended for the MR formulations. Lower strength MR biowaivers are possible considering the strict formulation and process similarity, linear PK, matching in vitro profiles, and preferably it is required to be supported by the IVIVC. We have to provide the strong justification. Sometimes, always remember that sometimes for MR formulations, bracketing bio can be done. For example, if you have 4 strains, you need to do the bio study on highest and lowest strength, and you can get the waiver for middle strength based on the linear kinetics, matching in vitro profiles, and IVIVC. Now, see the example of product specific guidance for metformin hydrochloride and sitagliptin phosphate tablet. In this, the metformin is extended release and sitagliptin is IR release. Different strains are there. So in this recommendation is that 2 bioequivalence studies with pharmacokinetic endpoints are to be performed on 1000 mg and 100 mg strength. Fasting and fed conditions are there for the bioequivalence. That means there is no waiver. We need to perform the bioequivalence study in fasting and fed state on the highest strength. And bioequivalence for the additional strength can be waived. It is clearly written here for the additional strength. Bioequivalence of the 100 mg, 50 mg base and 500 mg, 50 mg base strength to the corresponding reference listed drug strength may be demonstrated based on the principle laid out in most recent version of the US FDA guideline. And the guideline is bioequivalence studies with pharmacokinetic endpoints for drugs submitted under an ANDA. So we need to refer this guideline and we need to meet the criteria. Then dissolution requirement is there to show the method capability for discrimination and also to show the dissolution similarity in different medias or different pH medias. So 12 unit data is to be generated for reference formulation and test formulation all the strengths in pH 1.2, 4.5 and 6.8 pH media. This is the requirement. Then alcohol dose dumping requirement is also there. We need to demonstrate that the alcohol dose dumping is not there with the formulation or the formulation behaves similarly to the reference formulation in the alcoholic media. I have made different videos on the alcohol dose dumping studies. You can visit those videos to understand these things properly. So always understand that for modified release formulations, biowaivers are not possible or not granted, but the lower strengths biowaiver can be granted. Thank you for watching the video. Let's meet soon with such kind of another informative video.